What if I told you that Paul Baloff was one of the most important vocalists in the development of thrash metal? Because he basically appeared on one major album from a thrash band, but with that one album and all the live shows and live albums that stemmed from that said album, it reinvented thrash metal as we know today. In other words, he took what Metallica did on Kill 'Em All and he took it to another level. So today we're talking about Bonded by Blood by Exodus. The video will be in 3 parts. I'll give you some background on Bonded by Blood. I'll do my track-by-track review. Then I'll give you my reasons why Paul Baloff is one of the most important vocalists in thrash metal.
Legend who made one album twice. And horns up for Paul Baloff, the immortal one, the fucking never-ending juggernaut, the crusher, the killer. Smash everything, leave nothing unsmashed. That's right.
Interesting that Bonded by Blood was originally going to be released in the summer of 1984, but it got delayed and pushed back until April 5th, 1985, due to disputes with the record label and issues related with the album's artwork. The album also had a different title at first. It was called A Lesson in Violence, but they had to change it because they couldn't find an album cover design that matched that particular title. First, a quick history of Exodus. They formed in 1980 in San Francisco. Most people know by now their original guitarist was Kirk Hammett, but he left in 1983 to join Metallica. But after Kirk Hammett left the band, Exodus reformed and got new members, started writing songs for the debut album, Bonded by Blood. That included songs like Strike of the Beast and No Love in March of 1984. They recorded a demo known as the Turk Street Tapes, and this included several tracks that would appear on this album. This is the only full-length studio album with Paul Baloff on vocals, and I say that because he was later on one of their live albums. But Paul Baloff was a beast. He had this very raw and ferocious vocal style. It influenced countless other vocalists in other bands, and I'll talk about that all in part 3. People describe Bonded by Blood as being both unpolished but powerful. It was rebellious and aggressive. It was key to developing the Bay Area thrash metal style. He stood out compared to other vocalists at the time, like James Hetfield, for example, because he took everything to a new level. The album also has 2 guitarists, who are Gary Holt and Rick Hunolt. They're also very important. I should probably do another video on them anyway, but they weren't just lead and rhythm guitar. They were 2 guitarists who played off each other, and they were just as influential. There was also the drumming of Tom Hunting, who basically took everything that the drummers of the big 4 bands were doing, and he turned it up a notch. Bonded by Blood is also considered to be one of the first examples of extreme metal, possibly influential on death metal. Bonded by Blood also features the bass playing of Ron McKillop, and he was in the band in the early days. He left in 1991. I'm going to talk about the songs now. There are 9 tracks. The album is about 40 minutes long. Most of the music was written by Gary Holt, with a few tracks written by Gary and Rick Hunolt. Most of the lyrics were written by Paul Baloff, and with the help of Gary Holt, Tom Hunting, and producer Mark Whitaker. The album opens with a title track, Bonded by Blood. The first thing you hear is an airplane, leads to the first guitar riff. You immediately hear those galloping guitar riffs that were perfected by Gary Holt and Rick Hunolt. This is where you hear Paul Baloff the first time. He has this way of delivering his vocals in a way that sounds both angry and evil. Keep in mind, this band was all about aggression. The song also has 2 awesome back-to-back solos that are played behind the galloping guitar riffs. Next track is called Exodus. It makes me think of the fact that they missed an opportunity to do what both Black Sabbath and Iron Maiden did. And that was to have a self-titled song on a self-titled debut album. But despite this, it's another killer song, more of those galloping guitar riffs. The band also invented, or at least they did for thrash, they invented those gang vocals that were copied by many bands. It almost had this punk rock type of energy. The song also has some of the fastest played guitar riffs that were heard in thrash at the time. Gary and Rick were also masters of those dive bomb guitar licks that could be heard on this song.
It's called And Then. And then there was. And then there was none. Come on. Come on.
Next song is called And Then There Were None. The band might have slowed down the pace a little on the song, but it's still very heavy. If you don't know, the band has always prided themselves for not doing ballads and just playing straightforward thrash. I'm not saying they got softer, I'm just saying they took the tempo down a little bit. I also like the backing vocals on this track. They're very interesting, and the chorus is pretty cool. I like how it has this melodic hook. It's also cool how Paul Baloff does some dark and evil vocals at one part in the song. Not only that, in the last half of the song, they add this explosion and completely shifts gears, so that's another thing that they've done very well. After this is the track A Lesson in Violence, another iconic song. It brings back the speed, has lots of galloping guitar riffs. Also has some pretty cool tempo shifts that they slow down a little bit during the chorus just to give Paul Baloff an opportunity to add some emotion to his voice. They also added some melody during their twin guitar attack, so I thought that was pretty cool.
This next song is another fast one, but aren't they all? This one's called Metal Command.
Next song is Metal Command, and we all know it was common in those days to have a song with the word metal in the title just to let everyone know how metal you are, and that's the song. It's a killer track. It goes really hard, it's in your face. You could probably argue they got the idea from Metallica's Metal Militia, but I think they even made it sound better to me.
This next song, it ain't about no goldfish. And it ain't about no tuna fish. And it ain't about no trout. This song is called Piranha.
After this is Piranha. I think it's my favorite song on the album. I really like the guitar riff because the type of guitar riff that you've heard a lot from other bands that came after this. It has that classic galloping style. It's a very iconic song. I also like how Paul does these evil sounding vocals and also how they have the gang vocals in the chorus. It could also be argued that this is the best metal song about fish. So let me know in the comments if you can think of a better metal song about fish. No Love starts off with this acoustic Spanish guitar melody, so it kind of catches you off guard. You don't expect it, but then they continue more of their signature thrash metal. I would say this one has a slower pace than some of the others, but it's still very heavy, has some killer guitar riffs. It's also one of those instances where they wrote lyrics about dark occult themes, which would be similar to what Slayer was doing at the time. The second to last song was Deliver Us to Evil, another interesting one, as it's a 7-minute long song, which I guess was a little longer than a typical thrash metal song. I'm sure other bands like Metallica have had songs with that song length. Another great song. It has that signature chugging sound. Another reason I like the song is because some of the guitar riffs were a little more reminiscent of traditional heavy metal, but it worked well in the context of the song. Another song was those dark occult lyrics. Even though it's a 7-minute song, it doesn't feel long because there's so many different changes in its runtime. Strike of the Beast is the last song on the album, and let me just say one thing before going to part 3. I really enjoyed listening to the entire album again. I think it's because I didn't really listen to this a lot back in the day. So I didn't get burned out on it. It sounded very fresh compared to an album like Metallica's Kill 'Em All because I've listened to that hundreds of times, but I haven't listened to this one in a while. So I really enjoyed listening to this album. But let me talk about Strike of the Beast before I continue. It's just an awesome song. It's a powerful closer, has lots of speed, lots of aggression, and they just decided to end the album with a banger. Now I want to go into part 3. I'm going to give you 5 ways Paul Baloff influenced the future of thrash metal with the album Bonded by Blood.
And you know, he didn't have the best voice in the world, but he had tons of charisma, and he was the funniest guy in the world, and he knew the music, and he knew what we were shooting for.
First one was his stage presence. He wasn't just a singer, he was a maniac. He would do all these crazy things. He would climb on the speakers, dive into crowds. He would get the mosh pits going. The guy was like a tornado. He was a force of nature, and his stage presence was unpredictable. There were many frontmen who were inspired by Paul, such as Tom Araya from Slayer, Millie Petrozza from Creator, and even Randy Blythe from Lamb of God. Number 2 is that he really made the crowd feel like they were part of the show.
I was just so blown away how well he worked the stage. I mean, for someone who had very little band experience or stage experience, he really knew what he was doing, and he felt very comfortable on stage. And he was just a great frontman. And like I said, you know, for all his shortcomings that he had in the vocal department, he made up for just in sheer charisma and
He was someone who interacted with the audiences. He would tell people to stand up. He would get them to start a mosh pit. He was like a punk rock or hardcore frontman, but he took it to another level. Not only that, he was the master of gang vocals. A good example would be the track Bonded by Blood. This really took the live shows to another level. A few of the other artists who were inspired by him would be Phil Anselmo from Pantera, Max Cavalera from Sepultura, and Corey Taylor from Slipknot. Number 3 is he created this very unique persona as if he was some type of lunatic.
he was one of the most extreme frontmen I knew. I mean, if you weren't totally metal, you would be ostracized by Paul from the stage. He'd point people out in the audience and say, "You're a fag, get the hell out of here," or "That guy is not banging, kick his ass." He kind of fostered that whole attitude of being just really extreme.
He wasn't like James Hetfield of Metallica, who pretty much kept to himself on stage, and he had the advantage of just being a vocalist, not also being a guitarist, so he was free to run around and do whatever he wanted, and this inspired a lot of different artists, especially in death metal and black metal, where they would just go completely crazy on stage.
I think one of the best memories I have of Paul is one night we were sitting around in his car, drinking vodka straight from the bottle, listening to Venom and Merciful Fate, and we were drunk. And we were just, saying how much we loved each other, and, how great it was to finally have a band playing the type of music we wanted to play. And we all just all of a sudden decided that we should just immortalize it. And so someone whipped out a razor blade, and we started cutting up our hands. In fact, there's my scar right there, if you can see it.
Number 4 is he was someone who didn't care about going mainstream. Even though the band was getting a lot of exposure, he didn't tone it down just to reach a larger audience. He wanted to keep everything raw, unfiltered, underground. And this attitude had the opposite effect because it influenced lots of artists, especially in the crossover thrash scene, which included DRI and Suicidal Tendencies. Number 5, he was probably one of the only artists in metal to have created such a legacy after only appearing on one studio album. Now, granted, he returned for our reunion album, which was a live album, but even still, I can't think of any other artists off the top of my head who have done that with just one album. I think his influence doesn't stop in the golden years of thrash, which was the late 80s to early 90s. His influence continued into the 2000s with bands like Municipal Waste and Power Trip, and I can go on, but you can't deny his place in metal. That's all. I recently did a video about best and worst albums of 1985. I mentioned this one in that video, so if you want to check that out, and some of the other albums that came out that particular year, I'll stick that right there. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.